Alright, so now let's start to work on the hair. Now we don't need to see all of the geometry. So let's hide the eyes. We're going to keep the eyebrows, hide the lashes, and then the teeth. We're going to hop over to the Topo tab, and we need our reference drawings visible. So let's go to a front view, and we want to bring back our transparent material so we can see through to our turn drawings, our front view. And we're going to use our topology pen tool to create this hairline initially. So we're going to build that out, and then we're just going to bring that all the way around the model. So we're going to select on a new mesh layer, grab our topology pen tool, and then we're going to control drag and just drag out a polygon to start us off. And this initial polygon this side is going to be, it's going to match that part of her hair right there. And we're just going to drag out some fairly large polygons to start. Something like that. Going to do the same for this side. Now this is not symmetrical. Her hair is from the front forward, or from the mid of her head forward, is not symmetrical, but the back somewhat is. So this is a good start. So now we can see that from our reference drawing. Let's just pull this up. You can see that this hair, this is the part, and it comes over and it comes forward. So there's a little bit of space between that hair, that bang of her hair right here and her forehead, and there's a little bit of space right here. We're going to get to that, but initially we just need to establish where that's going to be, and on both sides. Alright, so we're going to close that out. And I'm going to continue this on, and this is going to be that little bit of, that little loop, that little flare of hair, if you will, that comes down. We just need to, we don't need to resolve that right now. We just need to have that in place. Okay, something like that. And we're going to bring this over, and this is also going to be this little strand of hair is going to come out down here. We're going to bring this out away from the face. So I just want to give myself a little bit of an indication of where that might take place. Probably will wind up pulling this forward a little bit, because I want to create a nice arc from here going down. Alright, then we're going to continue to pull out a row of polygons, trying to keep this part of her hair in mind as we do it, and just sort of work our way around, jumping back and forth to each side. Now I'm going to bring this around, and this is going to be the piece of hair that's going to function kind of as her little sideburn there, just that little bit of a loop of hair. And that's a good general shape. I'm going to do the same over here. I don't need to see the reference images right now, so I'm just going to hide our turn drawings. Pull that over. The idea here is to create, to sort of approximate this hair flow. Just going to set us up to add more detail when we subdivide. And again, this is that little loop of hair for her sideburn. You want to be sensitive to the shape and volume of the hair, meaning that the hair here at the part is probably going to be, it's going to have a little bit of a taper, so a little bit of thickness coming down this row, right? So a little bit thicker, a little bit thinner at that part. And I'm going to extend this edge to about right there. Okay, now I want to create, go to a side view. I want to create there's going to be another part of her hair, so the hair is going to part right along there. All right, so the front part of her hair is going to come out toward the front, to the sides, but then the back part, because she has ponytails, is going to be sort of tied, so it's going to come down, and we're going to have our topology flowing in a different direction. It's going to be a little bit more apparent as we get into it, but essentially what I'm looking at is just establishing a sort of a part line right about there. Okay. Just going to continue that polygon flow out, and again, working with bigger shapes sets you up for better topology when we go to subdivide. Bring that entire row out, something like that. Bring that back to that part line right there, just to get us blocked in. All right, let's move over to the other side. Pull that out. You can see that we can really quickly rough that in to get some good shapes. Nice large polygons. All right. And then this last row is going to tuck sort of right behind the ear there. So we go to a left view, and we can just sort of bring that back a little bit. Doesn't have to be perfect, because it's not going to be symmetrical, at least this front part. And we can even these polygons out just a little bit. Alright, so you can see now that we've got poly flow around here. Nice row of polys right there. And then these are going to come down. Everything is just really sort of evenly balanced. Okay. Alright, so that's that part. I still don't know how far down or out this is going to go, but we're going to get there. Alright, so now let's switch over to symmetry and control drag another polygon. And this back part is going to be symmetrical somewhat, so just to save some time, we can work in symmetry. And what I want to do now is just to run a row of polygons around the bottom part of her hairline and towards the middle. Alright, let that snap there. I'm not going to connect these just yet, but I want to sort of approximate where they would match up. This may or may not be symmetrical on both sides, but we'll see. See how that goes. And let's put in another row right there, and that just sort of evens things out to a nice clean mesh. Nice clean topology in the back, and we can just even that out a little bit more. Alright, continue on, pull these together. Alright, let's see how we did over here. I'm going to go ahead and let's finish off this first. Alright, finish this. Pull that together. and then we'll finish it off like that. Alright, let's turn symmetry off and then connect these up. Let's see. We'll go over here, go with what you know. We know that that's going to fit into there. Let's match these up as best we can. Put that there. Move that over. Alright, it looks like we got lucky there. Alright, I'm just going to even this out just a little bit. Okay. Alright, so let's take a look. We've got clean, finished off topology in the back. And then we have an asymmetrical front. We have indications of where this extra little bit of hair is going to come out from the face, and we have indications of where these little sideburn areas are going to be on both sides. Bring that back just a little bit more. Alright, so that's good. The next step is for us to probably subdivide this. Maybe a step before that, though, would be to add a little bit of thickness, because she's got a pretty good amount of volume in her hair. Let's go to our front view and let's bring back our turns and see how close we are. Alright, that's fairly close. It's a good shape. We follow the silhouette pretty much. Alright, so let's move on to thickening up the hair next. Now I want to add thickness to the hair, and we can do that with a thicken tool. So let's run that. We're not in symmetry, so thicken, and then just right click. I'm going to pull out a good bit. Alright, so I'm looking at this view over here. Alright, so we have some nice volume already just by thickening this out. And we're going to push and pull to establish some hills and valleys in here, but this is going to give us a good start. Now, because we've thickened, we have a row of polygons on the inside. Okay, we don't necessarily need those on the interior where it meets the hair would meet the skull, but we do need them over on the sides. Okay, so what we're going to do next is to look at the big forms, the big shapes of the hair, and working in a general to specific way. It's always a good idea to establish the big forms first. So the biggest form that I want to address first is this hair, this part to the hair. Okay, so this is going to be a big valley. And I'm going to go about the task of pushing the polygons around to get that shape. Alright, the next area is this second part to the hair right along the back here. We can do that the same sort of way, just sort of pull that down all the way around. I'm using the transparent material because I do want to see through my drawing. Through my mesh so that I can see my drawing. Do that on this side too. So we're going to establish a valley right here. So when we subdivide this, we'll have a good idea of where to go. We've already worked out the valleys and the hills at that point. Let's bring up the volume a little bit on the top here. And you can see as I work in the 3/4 view, you can see in the front view what it is we're doing. Again, just sort of approximating those shapes right now, roughing that in. This is still a really rough, low polygon sculpt. At least it is for now. Areas that are a little bit too much, we're going to smooth back. I'm going to pull this forward just a little bit. All right, and then I'll probably thin this down just a touch. So get a good vantage point. Just that front edge, pull that in a little closer. Again, it's going to taper the closer it gets to the end. We'll probably extend this out by a polygon or two. We still got this arc. Okay, we want to keep this nice shape, this nice curve. We don't want to make it too complicated. Keep it real simple at first. So when we subdivide, we have more geometry to push and pull around. We're doing less work. All right, so nice volume, nice shape there. We have a nice valley in here. We can pull those together a little bit closer because I know that the geometry is going to be it's going to need to be a little closer together. And we'll pull that back part down just a little bit too. We can probably pull this out just a touch and help to round that out just a little bit. And just like we did with the right side, we're going to bring the left side, we're going to pull that down just a little bit to create some volume to this side. We're going to keep the volume here, but this is going to be thinner. And this could stand to be a little thinner too. So again, the more that you work at a lower polygon level to get clean geometry, that's going to pay off for you when we subdivide and start working with the higher topology. All right, I'm going to try and match the other side. Something like that. And then back towards the back of the hair, we're going to do the same sort of thing. Now, I don't want a ledge of hair, for lack of a better term. We don't want that ridge back there. So we can soften that up a little bit, and let's just pull the polygons up and in to accomplish that. Pull that together. Smooth tool, or hit the shift key and smooth that out. Alright, let's bring this back a little bit closer, and we'll smooth that out too. Alright, so I'm going to continue to tweak this just a little bit more at this lower polygon level, and then we're going to subdivide our geometry and then work a little bit closer to establish more hills and valleys. And in this sort of a slow process, but a necessary one to work from this general to specific. So big forms first, and then as we get a little bit closer, we'll tighten those up and refine the shape of the head, the shape of the hair rather. Alright, so now that we've taken some time to work out the lower polygon geometry, we've established some decent hills and valleys, we want to subdivide the mesh and refine these shapes even further. So first off, I'm going to actually pull out this edge, just of that hair right there. I know that I'm going to pull this away from the forehead, away from the skin, because I know that I want that to come off. I'm going to make sure that we keep this established curve that we'd mentioned. All right. So this curve is really important. See how it arcs right there? All right, we're going to do the same with this one. Let's pull it away from the head. Get a good vantage point to do that. I often work from an under view, looking up like that. I find that to be pretty helpful. Okay, we'll probably want to extend that out a little bit. So hit X for our edge extend, and then click, or Shift X rather, Shift X, there we go, and then just pull that out. Something like that. Alright. And just sort of taper that down a little bit smaller than the polygon up here. Getting ready to subdivide this. So again, just check this arc of hair right here as it goes all the way around, and it's pretty good shape. Let's pull this one little bit out, just a touch. Something like that. Okay, and I think that's good enough. Alright, so hit D on the keyboard. Actually, let's back up. Let's go with duplicating our mesh first. Okay, so we're happy with this. So let's right click on that mesh and then duplicate. Hit OK. And let's see. Actually, let's hit escape to clear what else is selected. Now we select our mesh, right click, and hit duplicate. There we go. Alright, so we're going to hide that. Let's just go ahead and label it as hair low poly. Alright. We'll just put that in our support layer. Alright, so come back, hit D. Alright, so now we have a lot more topology to work with, and you can really start to see that not only do we have more polygons, it's rounder, it's more refined, but most importantly, we've got the hills and valleys. We have a nice start to that. Okay, we have some nice round volume in the back. We can pull out the hair for the ponytails. But this is a good start. We have a nice sense of volume in here. This negative space up there, it's going to have a nice shadow across the brow. And we have the start of a nice shape over here. We still have that nice gentle curve right there. Okay, that's going to be really important. Alright, so let's go about the task now of just sort of tightening up this geometry one more level in. Alright, so pinch tool, let's go ahead and establish those valleys. Let's pull that together. Now that might be a little aggressive, so let's pull back the offset amount down to something a little bit low. Alright, I'm going to pull those edges together just like that. I'm going to do the same over here. Not too tight, but just tight enough. We're going to work up to that. We're going to work up to that tightness. All right, pull these together just a touch. All right, that looks good. It's coming along. All these can sort of be pulled in together a little bit. smooth, again, to sort of smooth out areas that you want. All right. Now we want access to our other sculpting tool. So if you hit F3, that's going to bring up our sculpting tools. There we go. And let's hit that carve tool. I want to get a nice little part right here. All right. So that's going to bring that down pretty significantly, which is good to have. And we'll just hit that over on this side too, and across this other side. Just a little bit. All right. Looking good. Get that out of there. And move tool. Let's continue to shape this a little bit. I want to accentuate that form a little bit more. I'm just going to pull it out, still maintaining the shape. The smoother that is right now, the smoother it is, the smoother it's going to be when we subdivide again. So really take some time to do that. See that little area right there? I want to pull that out. Just even that up a little bit, just so I feel comfortable with that. All right. Looks good. All right, now let's bring that little area, a little triangular area, of her sideburn. Let's address that a little bit. Pull that down. Smooth that out. We're going to lose some volume, which is the goal. All right, we'll smooth that out a little bit, and then we'll tuck that. Just smooth that, and then we'll sort of tuck this edge of topology back into the head just a touch, just a little bit. You can see those polygons go below the surface, and that's good. All right. Let's get a little bit more volume up in here. See if we can do that with the move tool. You can also use the inflate tool, and I will do that periodically. Alright, so I'm going to select these polygons right here, and I'm just going to lock them. I'm going to hit J. I'm going to continue to pull these out. Well, that didn't work. Maybe I'll create a selection with those lines, let's say just temporarily, and then I'll lock those lines by hitting J. Now we'll move this out. And that's better, because I don't want to affect that valley. I want to be able to push and pull the volume here without affecting that valley too much, because that's at a pretty decent depth. Pull that up and then smooth it off. All right, just working to, again, sort of establish a nice bit of volume around here. We still haven't, at this early stage, we're not working on any really fine detail. It's just general big shapes first. Okay. All right, almost there. All right, happy with that. Let's get this volume back over here. Probably a little bit higher than what we have right now. Sort of push that there, and then we'll push it over to the left a little bit more. You can see I'm starting to match my reference drawings in here. I'm sort of tumbling around the viewport to get different perspectives of that volume. You'll want to do that. Make sure that you work in an area, then turn your model, work on it from a different area. That's going to ensure that you have you're giving yourself enough information to work with. All right, I'm going to smooth this part out, just round that a little bit, right at that little apex. And you can see this is the area that we're pulling back a little bit. All right, so when we subdivide that, you can see that we've got basically the volume worked out. We just need to do a little tweaking, a little more tweaking. Smoothing out as we go. So move some polygons and then smooth it out. It's a good workflow. It's a good habit to get into. All right. So again, sort of looking at the volume of this hair. We want it really rounded. We don't want it flat. And so I'm looking at these lines as they're going up, these edges as they go up, just to make sure that they're all going outward. They're bowing outward to give that nice rounded look. Okay, if you see some flat areas, just pull those up. Okay. All right, let's shape this little sideburn area over here. And we'll pull that geometry close to the head and submerge that into the actual geometry of the head, so it's sort of buried in there. That's good. Smooth that out a little bit to reduce the volume. And we'll just round it out. All right, so we're getting ready to subdivide this again to get another level of detail, and then we'll talk about, once we've sculpted a little bit more finer detail, we'll talk about how we're going to finish off the hair, a good strategy for that, and how we're going to get some nice definition, strands of hair going around here, the parts that are going to make sense. All right, we're going to talk about that in a second. Last thing I want to do at this phase is just to give myself a little bit of an indication of where these ponytails are going to be. Okay, so I'm going to look down here. That's going to give me a general idea of where to pull from. Now, I've got some geometry locked, so I'm going to hit I to unlock. Remember that edge that we locked up there. All right, let's pull this out. We can use the inflate tool to do that. And just hit that with the inflate tool. And it's going to push this out. Just going to do one side. Smooth it back a little bit. And then let's just sort of eyeball it for the other side. And the idea here is that the hair is going to be pulled back, from this middle part down the back of her head out into these two little ponytails. So it's just kind of a clumping, a gathering of that hair. We just need to create some volume to achieve that look. Alright, so you can see that this doesn't quite match up with the reference here, but I do like the way that it pulls back from here. So we're going to go with the 3D view. I'm just going to tighten this part up just a little bit, and then we'll move on. Alright, so now we're ready to add a little bit more detail to the hair. But first I want to bring your attention to a couple of areas that we need to address before we subdivide this hair mesh. So first of all, we're going to duplicate this mesh. So that's been duplicated and I pulled that into my head support. Take a look at the hair on the inside of this little bang right here. So I've pulled the geometry of that hair mesh down into so it penetrates the skin of our head mesh, and that's just going to help to further define the hairline. So if we have a camera angle from right here, we're not looking through there and seeing all the the hair back, the interior of the hair back here. We just want to have that refined. So you want to make sure that you take a little time to really get in there deep and just pull those points just so that we can refine that edge. We did the same thing on this side, and we've also deepened and refined a little bit more the valleys of the parts of the hair right here and along this section across here. All right, we've also pulled out the start of where our ponytails are going to be. Okay, and then if you'll notice in the front view and in the side view, when we subdivide, we're really pretty close. You can see obviously that there's a discrepancy with the drawing and the 3D here, but I do like the way that this looks a little bit better, so we're going to go with the 3D the 3D version versus the 2D version. Now I've been working in the right the right side, and let me just point this out. If I reveal my trans material, pull that back. This is actually the left side of the drawing. Okay, so remember it's an asymmetrical treatment to the hair, but you can see that I've really come forward with the bangs over here. Okay, so you can see that there's a big difference between what I have in the 3D view and what we have in the 2D view. And honestly, there's a lot of things you just can't see when you're drawing this out, so just be prepared to use this as reference for for what it is, but then you want to stay true and let the 3D, what it looks like in 3D dominate your decision making. Now what we've done is, let me just pull back that transparent material. I want to create these flares of her hair. Now this is a little bit long, okay, but that's alright. We're still going to try to keep the spirit of this drawing into the characteristics of her hair, and this right here is not quite as in the same spot that we have in the drawing, and that's okay. This is hair is we have some room for interpretation. So what we're going to do is bend this out a little bit. So we're going to select that loop and then shift up arrow to grow that selection, maybe down one, and I'm going to use a new tool called the flex tool. Alright, so shift Y gives us the flex tool, and what this allows us, it's going to allow us to do is to gently bend that hair out. Okay, we're going to try and keep the nice arc that we have here, but we're just going to bend it around. Shift up arrow. We have a nice fall off with that tool, so that's a good thing to have. It's a good way to manipulate geometry in a really forgiving way. So we're just going to tweak that a little bit. You can see I'm turning it slightly, but I'm also trying to maintain, again, that curve all the way around there. Alright, so I'm going to deselect that, move tool, and I'm going to bring back that curve just a little bit. Okay, so you can see what we've got. Alright, so that's pretty good. I kind of like that. And if we decide to later on tweak that a little bit further, we can do that. But I think that's good enough to move on. Alright, so we're close, but it's alright. Let me just get this last little bit. Us artists, we're going to sort of tweak and tweak and tweak as we go, so bear with me for just a second. But I really want to make that little flip, that little characteristic Just want to add that in there. That's going to make me feel a little bit better. Okay. Let's do the same thing over here. So select that loop, hitting L, and then Shift up arrow, Shift Y for the flex tool. We'll just bend this around a little bit more. We can pull, and I probably are I'm gonna want to extend this out a little bit. We might need to add some more topology in there, but we'll see. Alright, so Shift up arrow. We're going to grow that selection just a little bit and then twist it. Just like that. Alright, and that's a pretty good start. You can see I kind of changed the direction. We went in a different direction there. I might change my mind later. It just depends on how it looks when we start to finish out the hair. But I think for now we're good to go. Going to come back with the move tool and just reestablish this edge a little bit more. And I do want to put in another loop slice, so Alt-C right along there, preserve curvature. I think that's going to help us retain that shape. And then another one right here. Alright, it's going to hold that shape a little bit better for us. Good enough. What we're going to do next, let's duplicate this again. So we'll duplicate that, and we will put that in our support geometry layer. Come back here, and now we're just going to hit D, subdivide our mesh. And because we've taken some time to work out and even out the topology, let me just turn off this transparent material so we can see the clay. That's a lot better. You can see that this is raw polygon mode, and you see how clean it is right now. So when you subdivide, you hit Tab, it really holds its shape nicely. And this is going to be good for our next step, which is just to further refine some of these shapes should we want to. But it's really, honestly, it's really close. So I might not do that much refinement. We might just jump back to the to the ponytails and drop those in so we can more or less complete the shape of the head and the hair. And so we're looking at more of a complete form. Right now it's obviously it's not there, so it's sort of missing something. So let's go ahead and complete that. We'll work on the ponytails next. So let me just maximize this viewport, and I'm going to talk about the construction of this ponytail. The idea is that we've got this hair from the back of her head is going to feed into that ponytail, right? And then we've got this little hairband section, and then just draw it out here. We've got this little taper to her ponytail, all right? And then we've got a little twist going. All right, so first we want to define the shape of this taper. Okay, so we're going to create a tapered core shape first, and then you notice these little strands of hair that are coming off of the ponytail itself, like this. And that's going to help break up this big shape, this core shape of hair. Okay, it's going to soften that look once we get to the rendering part, and we'll have this nice texture that's kind of running throughout it, and it's going to be sort of a layered effect. Let's first start with a primitive. All right, so let's get our viewport back. Go to our primitive shapes on a new mesh layer. I'm going to create a sphere and just draw that out in the viewport. Make sure that the axis is on the Y. And let's position this using our multiple viewports to get it to a good starting position. Something like that. Alright, spacebar to drop the tool. And what we want to do is to create more of a taper than what we have to start with. So we're going to do that with the flex tool. So let's select a couple polygons, hit L, and then shift up arrow, and then shift down arrow a little bit, and then hit shift Y. And that's going to give us our flex tool. Alright, this gives us a nice fall off that we can manipulate pretty evenly. To create this sort of taper. So again, shift up arrow, oops, undo that a little bit. So shift up arrow to grow that selection, and then just sort of negotiate that into place. Alright, let's do the same thing down here at the bottom. Select a couple of polygons in that row. L to select the loop, and then let's shift up arrow and down arrow to get what we want to manipulate. Shift Y for our flex tool, and let's bend it in the other direction. Something like that. Okay, so we have this nice little S shape to start with. Hit the Y key, and now we're in a better position to start with. General thickness is fine, and the general taper is fine. We can work on that a little bit more. Let's just grab our move sculpt tool and hold the shift key, and then just sort of smooth that out a little bit to refine that taper a little bit more. Alright, I want it fairly tight up at the top and up at and down at the bottom. Okay, so we unsubdivide that. You can see that it's fairly decent topology. It's not perfect, but honestly it doesn't have to be at this point. Alright, so that's a good place to start. Now, that's the first layer. Now, to create these little strands that go off of it to break up the silhouette and to add a little bit more visual interest, let's borrow some of the topology from this core shape and cut and paste that into another layer. So 3 or 4 rows of polygons should do it. I'm not going all the way down to the end because those are triangles and we don't really need those really. I want to stay away from those. Alright, so let's copy those polygons, hit N for a new mesh layer, and then paste them. Now we want to pull them out from the base that we created. So we can do that with the push tool. So select the push tool, then right click, and then let's just pull that out just a touch from, you can see that little gap, okay, and that's going to be probably good enough for us to work with at this point, maybe a little bit more. So now we've got the start of these little hair strands. Let's grab our move tool and just sort of start massaging these points out a little bit to create a little bit more volume. Sort of subtly breaking that silhouette up a little bit. Use your multiple viewports to sort of get a better idea of the silhouette, what you're working on. It's a good idea to do that. And then let's tuck this top part down into our base. Okay, because that's going to be covered with a little hairband she's got. Okay, so I think that's good enough to start with. Now we're not working on a final pose here, we're just sort of setting ourselves up for just to have a good base to work with, so that when we get to the posing phase we'll have some stuff, we'll have more geometry to work with, it'll be visually more interesting, and then we can work on silhouette and what from the camera angle that we choose, what we see in the silhouette, if it's broken up enough or if we need to flare an end out or bulge an area, we can do that. So what I'm going to do is just sort of step and repeat this process. So go back to our base mesh, grab more polygons, and I'm going to do that throughout the whole ponytail all the way around. So 3 or 4 or 5, It's going to do the trick, I believe. Alright, so again, we're going to copy that, new mesh layer, paste it, run the push tool. Now when we've selected the push tool before to pull it away from the base, well, it remembers the amount of push that happened in the last go round. So we're just going to hit apply, so that's a nice convenience. And again, sort of push and pull these polygons just to create a nice little breakup of that shape. We'll probably want to overlap them a little bit to create even more visual interest, more shadows, that sort of thing. Bulge areas out. Again, just sort of have some fun with that. And again, not really worried about too much of the pose at all right now. Just what we can just get us in a good position. Okay, so you can see that we have this base shape, and we're starting to sort of populate, we're sort of to build out through a layering part, through a layering process rather, these little hair strands, and we'll mix them up. So this is pretty thick. We'll maybe have a thin one here, over there, and then we'll be able to mirror this over to the other side, and then do just a little bit of adjusting to make sure it doesn't look like it's, you know, an exact copy of it. So we can cheat that way a little bit, and it'll look very natural. I want to point something else out to you that regarding the material that we're working with. So let's hop over here to the clay material, and you can see that I can see the back side of it, which is a nice convenience. But down here, to set that up, it's not automatically turned on, but you see where it says smoothing angle underneath there, double-sided. If you tick that on like it is now, you can see through, but if it's off by default, you see that you can see that whole, you can see the back side, which is transparent. Okay, and so I just tick that on so that we can just get a better representation of, from the different viewports, of what it's starting to look like. Just wanted to point that out. So again, we're going to repeat this cut and pasting of the hair strands to populate the rest of the ponytail, and then move on. Alright, so now that we're comfortable with the amount of detail we've added by adding these hair strands, you can see that some of them overlap, some of them are a little bit shorter than others and thinner than others. Anyway, the point is to break up this core shape, this underlying start mesh that we began with. So now that we have those all completed, let's merge these together. So select all of those, and then let's right click and then go to merge meshes. Okay, so now we have one single mesh to work with, and let's better position that. You can see it's a little bit off from the back view here. Alright, so let's get a back view, and then just hit the Y key and sort of move that over just a touch. Something like that. Alright, looks pretty good. Alright, so let's move on to the hair bands. Let's create a new mesh layer. Now this is going to be pretty easy, so let me just hide this bottom just temporarily. You can see it's just basically two little cylinders overlapping each other, and honestly this is a detail that it's not, you know, super critical. Probably it won't even be noticed, but you need to have it there, obviously. So let's create a simple shape. 12-sided cylinder should do the trick. Drag that out on the Y, and let's just create one, something like that. Alright, let's bring back our other mesh. That would be helpful. And let's get it into a general position. Something like that. Changing the action center, you see that little widget switch from an automatic to a selection action center. That's really helpful when you're working off axis like that. Alright, let's grow that a little bit bigger. Alright, let's hide our unselected, and let's just bevel this out a little bit, or in rather, something like that. And we don't need those polygons, so we'll just delete them. Run a loop slice around here of, let's just say 2 in a symmetrical way, something like that. Select those 2 polygons along that loop and hit L, and we're just going to push this out a little bit to round it off. Okay, so when we hit tab, we get this nice rounded effect, something like that, real simple. Alright, so let's just sort of negotiate that into place. Eyeball that a little bit. Alright, let's copy that in for new mesh layer and then paste it. Y key, and then let's just make this a little different. Maybe stretch it a little bit and then rotate it. There's going to be a little bit of overlap. Just whatever you think is nice. Use the move tool. Let's just pull that out so we can see it a little bit better. Tuck it in here and there, and just make that a believable for what it is. Alright, let's go to our bottom one. Let's just let's massage those points a little bit, make it less uniform, a little bit more natural looking. Okay, well, I think for now we're just going to leave it like that. That's going to suffice. So let's take those 2 meshes, and again we'll merge those together. Okay, make sure that they're in the raw polygon mode. We're going to cut those and go to our ponytail mesh, which is also in raw polygon mode, and then paste it. Alright, so now we've got decent looking ponytail there on one side, and let's just mirror that over to the other side. Alright, so Shift V and then hit apply. And now we've got 2 good looking ponytails. Right, and it gives us really a better sense of where the hair is going. And I think the next section, what we're going to do is to work on building out some layers in the main part of the hair, again to sort of break this silhouette up and to address some of these wisps of hair, or these hair strands that might be coming off of the head. We're going to use the same method to do that, cutting and pasting from our base geometry and seeing what kind of results we can get from that. If you go to this RayGL, you can see that right now it's not too terribly interesting right now compared to the ponytails. Alright, so we want to change that. Let's just create a little bit more detail in there. Select our hair mesh. We're just going to paint select some of these polygons again in these strips. I'm going to go all the way down to the valley there and just grab a few of these. Whoa, not too many. Something like this. Just what we think are going to be, it's going to be a nice shape. Okay? Something like that. Alright, and these are going to be supporting geometric features. Okay, so let's copy those, new mesh layer, and then paste. And again, we're going to use our push tool to push that geometry away from our base mesh. Okay, and then we can use our move tool and sort of, I want to tuck these down, especially at the valley here. Okay, so this is going to be tucked into our mesh, right where you would think it needs to be tucked. Something like this. Okay, and then we can use our different sculpting tools to sort of pull this out even further. Again, we're just sort of creating some visual interest. And let's use the flex tool. Let's just say L for loop. Alright, let's grab these and then shift Y. And I'm going to grab this gray handle on the outside, and that's oriented toward the viewport. I often will use that if I'm doing something that's a little bit more organic, something like this. It's a good candidate for that tool. And just sort of play around with these shapes. Being sensitive to the volume of this little hair strand. It's going to have slightly different profile to it than the underlying mesh, which is good. That's what we want. It's going to help to break it up. Alright, you don't really see it that much in this front view, but you really start to see it in this 3/4 view. Let's thin that out a little bit. So shift with our move tool selected gives us a nice smoothing effect. And just sort of massage those points into place. Taking care to sort of round out and maybe give these guys at the end a little bit of a point. Just sort of subtle little taper. Something like that. Again, sort of establish more volume here to that little bit. Okay, and you can see just from this one little piece where we're going with it. Now, a lot of these little parts individually don't really do much, but once you put them together collectively, they do create a lot more visual interest, and they give you a lot more opportunity to create something cool, to really break up the silhouette, just make things a little bit more visually interesting. And we're just going to put these into place right now, and then when we get to the texturing part, that's where we're going to sort of massage these a little bit more. Look at the silhouette, look at the volume, and really work toward getting a nice shape, nice render. And I think that's about as much tweaking as I need to do right now with that. Okay, so with that same idea in mind, I'm going to go ahead and populate the rest of this hair, just here and there. I might not do all of it, but we'll do little parts just to see if we can break that up, create more visual interest, and see what that does for us. Alright, now that we've taken some time to establish these hair strips, these little strands of hair that are going to serve as supportive elements for her hair, just to give it more visual interest. You can see from the multiple views that we have how much more interesting it is now. Okay, and it's just a layering effect. We have some thicker strips, some thinner strips, and there's some overlap. You can see how the polygons overlap each other a little bit. Now, I haven't extended it all the way back to the back. I still might do that, but at this phase I really want to just sort of leave it like that, work on something else, and then maybe come back to this later on just to see how I'm liking it. Just going to show you this Ragiel. It's a lot more visually interesting. There's a lot of interesting things that are happening, and we get that through layering. Take a look at that. You can see some of these gaps in here. We may want to fill those in at some point. You can see this one especially. So we can tweak that once we add the textures in, and that may or may not be an advantage to have that quite so separated like that. So we might want to tuck those areas in should we have some sort of back shot of her head. That might look a little weird. We might want to fill this in at some point too. But at this point, until we get textures on it, it's really hard to make that call. But I like the way that it's going in terms of just the added interest we have from this vantage point, and considering that's our goal, I think it's a good place for us to sort of pause right here and leave the hair as it is and move on to the next part of the project.